I was born in Kerioth. I was born in Kerioth, a small place, more stone than soil, in the south of Judea. The air there was dry, and the olive trees clung to the earth like stubborn elders, their roots deep, their branches gnarled. My father used to say that a man must be like those trees, unmoved by Rome, unmoved by hunger, unmoved by fear. Yet, in my boyhood, fear was everywhere. We lived under the watch of soldiers who did not know our tongue and did not care to. They passed through our streets with iron upon their backs and mockery upon their lips. I remember the glint of their helmets in the sun, the sound of leather sandals striking the ground in cruel rhythm. My mother would pull me inside when they came, whispering prayers, clutching my shoulder so tightly I still recall the shape of her fingers pressed into my skin. But not all was fear. There were festivals when the market filled with color and the songs of pilgrims rose toward heaven. There was bread still warm from the oven, figs sweet as honey, and the laughter of children running barefoot through the dust. I was one of them, chasing shadows, chasing dreams. Yet even then, I carried a question in my heart. When will deliverance come? At night, lying on the roof beneath the stars, I would listen to the elders speak of a coming teacher, a healer, a Messiah who would restore Israel and tear down the yoke of Rome. My chest would swell at the thought. I was just a boy, but I longed to give myself to something greater than survival. I did not yet know his name. I did not yet know that the one I would love beyond all measure would one day ask of me the heaviest burden a friend can bear. My father's name was Simon. He was a man of stern silences and calloused hands, a stonemason who could coax order out of rough rock. He did not laugh often, though when he did, the sound startled us like sudden rain. My mother, Hannah, carried more tenderness, though it was woven tightly with worry. She kept the hearth and whispered psalms as though her breath itself could protect us. We were not poor, but we were not free. Every coin earned by my father's chisel seemed to pass through Roman fingers before it reached our table. I learned early the bitterness of tribute, the weight of taxes taken from our bread. Father would spit in the dust whenever he returned from the collectors. A land promised to Abraham, he would mutter, yet taken from us each day. I was the youngest of three. My brothers were strong and often rough with me, as elder brothers are. They dreamed of swords and rebellion, of joining zealots in the hills who struck fear into Roman hearts. I listened to their talk with wide eyes, but my mother would hush them, warning that such words could end a family line. Our home was a simple one, mud brick and stone, roofed with reeds. But within it, I felt the deep bond of a people who still believed they were chosen. On Sabbaths, we would gather with neighbors in prayer, candles flickering, voices rising as one. Even as a child, I felt something stirring in those moments, as though heaven leaned low to hear us. When I was old enough, my father took me to the workyard, placed a hammer in my hand, and taught me to shape stone. "You must know how to build," he said. "One day you will be a man who builds a world better than this." I struck the rock until my arms ached, and in the rhythm of that labor, I dreamed of another kind of building, one not of walls, but of hope. Still, I was restless. The stories of prophets and kings, the whisper of a coming deliverer, they called to me more than stone ever could. My heart longed for something I could not name, a love I had not yet met. When I was 12, I was sent with my father to Jerusalem for the Passover. The road was crowded with pilgrims, families from Galilee, merchants from the coast, shepherds driving bleating lambs to be sacrificed. Dust clung to our sandals, and the songs of the people rose above the groaning of animals and the shouting of traders. I had never seen such a gathering. For a boy from Kerioth, it felt like the whole world had converged upon that holy hill. And when we came in sight of the temple, my breath caught. The white stone gleamed against the sky, and the great golden doors shone like fire. I remember clutching my father's robe and whispering, This is the dwelling of God?" He looked down at me, eyes stern, and said, "So they say. But remember, child, God dwells also in the broken heart and the faithful life." It was in that city that I first felt the weight of our people's longing. Everywhere men spoke in hushed tones of Rome's cruelty, of the temple priests who grew fat while widows starved. Whispers of a liberator hung in the air like incense, half hope, half fear. One afternoon, as my father bartered for stone tools, I wandered to the court where teachers of the law debated. Their voices were sharp, their words heavy, and I understood little. But I saw a boy not much older than myself, sitting among them, speaking with a clarity that stilled the crowd. His eyes shone with a light I had never seen. Later I asked my father who he was, but he shook his head. He did not know. Still, the image burned in me. Back home, I began to seek more than the hammer and stone. I listened at night when travelers lodged with us, collecting tales of prophets and rebels. My brothers laughed at me, saying I was more dreamer than worker. Yet I could not help it. Something within me stirred whenever I heard the words of Isaiah or the Psalms of David. It was as though the earth itself whispered, "Prepare. The time is near." There was one moment that sealed it. A Roman patrol passed through Kerioth one summer evening, their armor glinting red with the setting sun. They dragged behind them a young man, bound and beaten. My mother pressed me to her side, but I could not look away. The soldier struck him when he stumbled, yet on the young man's face was no hatred, only a strange, quiet strength. Something in that man's endurance told me that power was not where Rome thought it lay. From that day on, I prayed not only for freedom, but for the strength to serve when freedom came. I was still a boy, but I felt myself set apart, waiting for the one who would change the world. As I grew into manhood, the dust of Kerioth could no longer hold me. My father's hands hardened around the chisel and mallet, shaping stone for others' homes, while I longed for the open road, the press of crowds, the stirring voices of men who spoke of freedom. My brothers mocked my restlessness, saying I was fit only for words, not for work. Perhaps they were right. When I was 17, I began to travel with traders. We carried wine from Hebron, dried fish from Galilee, spices brought from the east. I learned the tongues of merchants, the weight of coins, the faces of soldiers who inspected us at every checkpoint. In the markets of Jerusalem, I saw the hunger of widows and the greed of priests. In the villages of Galilee, I felt the yearning of fishermen and shepherds who dreamed of a kingdom not ruled by Caesar. But the roads also showed me beauty. I walked through fields of barley bending in the wind, sat beneath fig trees heavy with fruit, and watched the Jordan gleam like silver in the sun. I met people who welcomed me with bread and oil, though they had little themselves. Everywhere I went, I heard the same question: when will the deliverer come? It was in those years I first heard the name of Mary of Magdala. Whispers passed among traders of a woman in Galilee, sharp of wit and bold of spirit, who spoke of the mercy of God with a voice that silenced men. Some dismissed her as mad, others as dangerous, but I was intrigued. Even before I encountered the teacher she followed, the people around her were already shaping the air with new hope. I returned to Kerioth only in winters to ease my mother's fears and bring coins to the household. My father, older and wearier, no longer spoke of rebellion. His faith was in survival. But my own faith burned hotter each year. I would lie awake on the roof of our house, staring at the stars as my ancestors had, and pray, "Lord, let me serve the one you send. Let me be found worthy when the time comes." There was a hunger in me that no trade could satisfy, no coin could quiet. And in time that hunger led me north, along the roads that wound through Samaria and Galilee, roads that carried rumors of a rabbi unlike any other, a man who healed the sick and spoke of the kingdom of heaven as though he had seen it with his own eyes. I did not yet know his face, but my heart beat faster whenever I heard his name. To understand the weight I carried as a young man, you must first remember the times. Judea was not free. It was a land under the shadow of Rome, and Rome was a shadow that stretched long. The governors and prefects ruled with iron calculation. They cared nothing for the God of Abraham, nor the prayers of our people. To them, Judea was a restless province, valuable only for the taxes it yielded and the peace it could be forced to keep. Roman soldiers walked our roads in pairs and in legions, their standards raised high, the eagle of Caesar glaring down upon us. The temple in Jerusalem still stood in its glory, but even there the hand of Rome reached in. The high priests, robed in splendor, balanced their devotion against their bargains with the occupiers. They spoke of purity, yet many grew fat on coin while widows starved. Among the people, whispers of corruption clung to them like smoke. Still, we brought our offerings, for what else could we do? Beyond the walls of Jerusalem, the land itself seemed divided. In Galilee, fishermen hauled their nets under the eyes of tax collectors, who claimed a portion for Rome, and another for Herod, Caesar's puppet. In Samaria, resentment simmered between neighbors who prayed to the same God but despised each other's altars. In Judea, zealots and rebels sharpened daggers in secret, waiting for the day to strike. Everywhere, tension coiled like a serpent. Hope and despair lived side by side. One man would pray for deliverance, another would plot rebellion, a third would bow his head in silence, believing God had abandoned us. I was young, but I saw it clearly. A people broken under weight, yet still dreaming of freedom. We were a tinderbox, waiting for a spark. And it was into this world that he came, the one my heart had been waiting for, the one whose love would mark me forever. Before I ever laid eyes upon him, I heard his name whispered on the roads like a secret carried by the wind. Yeshua of Nazareth, they called him. Though some said no good thing could come from Nazareth, yet the story spread faster than the merchants' caravans. In the markets of Jericho, I heard a widow speak of how he touched her son's eyes, clouded since birth, and the boy had opened them wide to see the light of day. In Samaria, a man swore that Yeshua had spoken only a few words, and his fever vanished like mist before the sun. Fishermen in Galilee told me of nets breaking with fish at his command, of storms calmed with a gesture of his hand. But it was not only the miracles. What stirred me most were the tales of his words. They said he spoke not like the teachers of the law, who bound men with rules and burdens, but like one who carried the very heart of God upon his lips. Some said he told stories of seeds and fields, of lamps and coins, simple things, yet in them people heard mysteries of heaven. I listened with hunger, my chest tightening each time his name was spoken. Could this be the one? The deliverer my people longed for, the one I had prayed to serve under the stars of Kerioth? Others doubted. He is only a carpenter's son, they scoffed, a dreamer from Galilee. The priests in Jerusalem muttered that his teachings were dangerous, that he stirred the people too much. But their warnings only deepened my curiosity. If he threatened the powers of this world, perhaps he carried the power of the world to come. And there was Mary of Magdala. Traders said she walked beside him openly, not as a follower hidden in shadows, but as one who shared his life. Some wagged their tongues, but others spoke of her dignity, her fierce devotion. To me, it was not scandal, but proof. Only one who knew love so deeply could speak of God so freely. At night, on the road, I would lie awake by the embers of the fire and whisper into the darkness, "Let me find him. Let me stand by him. Let me give all that I am." And then one day, the stories were no longer enough. My feet turned north, toward Galilee, toward the one who would change everything. I remember the day as if it were carved into my bones. It was not in a grand hall or a temple court, but on the open road near Capernaum. The lake lay before us, blue and restless, and the smell of fish hung heavy in the air. The marketplace buzzed with traders and children, the shouts of men haggling, the bleating of goats. It was an ordinary day, no different from 100 others, until he was there. I had expected a figure of majesty, a man tall and commanding, perhaps clothed like a prophet of old. But Yeshua stood among the people in simple garments, worn by dust and travel. His face was sun-browned, his hands rough as any laborer's. And yet, when he turned, when his eyes met mine, I felt as though the world itself had stilled. Those eyes. They carried both fire and gentleness, as though he could see the wound in me and love it all the same. I had never been looked at like that, not by my father, not by my brothers, not even by my mother. It was the gaze of one who already knew me, as if we had been bound together long before birth. I did not speak at first. My throat was dry, my tongue heavy. It was he who spoke. Judas of Kerioth. He said my name. How could he have known it? The sound of it on his lips was like the calling of a shepherd to his sheep, a sound I had always waited to hear without knowing it. I fell to my knees, though he had not asked it. "Rabbi," I whispered, "I have searched for you." He reached down, took my hands, and lifted me to my feet. "No," he said softly, almost like a secret. "I have searched for you." Behind him stood others. Simon Peter, with his weathered face. John the dreamer, with eyes wide as the sky. Matthew the tax collector, still uneasy in his new skin. And near them, Mary of Magdala, her gaze steady, her presence like a flame beside his. She looked at me with something between welcome and warning, as though she already knew the weight I would one day bear. In that moment, I belonged. Not to Kerioth, not to Rome, not to myself, but to him. My heart was sealed, my fate bound. And though I did not yet understand, the path to both love and sorrow began with that meeting by the waters of Galilee. When Yeshua lifted me to my feet, the world felt both new and unbearably familiar, as though I had stepped into a story I had always known, but had never yet spoken aloud. Still, I was not alone with him. Others stood close, and it was in their eyes I saw how his presence reshaped lives. Simon, then Peter, were the first I noticed. Broad-shouldered, his face carved by sun and sea, he looked at me with suspicion, as though measuring my worth. His hands were thick and scarred from nets and rope, the hands of a man who had fought the waters his whole life. Yet when Yeshua spoke his name, Peter's whole body softened, as though those rough hands were suddenly strong enough to hold hope itself. Beside him stood John, the youngest. His eyes shone with a kind of wonder, as if every word from the rabbi's mouth was a jewel he longed to gather and guard. He smiled at me, shy yet welcoming, and in that smile I sensed the heart of a child who trusted without question. Then there was Matthew. His cloak still bore the faint stains of ink and coin, marks of his life as a tax collector. He did not meet my gaze at once, ashamed perhaps, or still wrestling with the old life he had abandoned. But I recognized something in him. Guilt, yes, but also a fierce longing to be remade. We were alike in that. And then Mary of Magdala. I had heard whispers of her on the roads, but they had not prepared me. She did not hide behind the men, nor cast down her eyes as so many women were forced to do. She stood beside Yeshua, as if she had every right, her chin lifted, her gaze unflinching. There was no softness in her presence, but neither was there pride. Rather, there was strength, the kind that comes from having walked through fire and come forth tempered, not destroyed. When she looked at me, it was not the gaze of welcome I expected, nor of dismissal. It was a gaze that pierced, as though she could see into the marrow of me. I felt then both small and chosen, as if she knew the part I would play long before I did. I lowered my eyes, but the weight of her knowing stayed with me. The others, James and Andrew, Thomas with his sharp brow, and more I would learn in time, all greeted me with a mixture of curiosity and reserve. Yet it was clear each of them had been called in their own way. Each had answered a summons only they could hear. And standing in the center of them, Yeshua bound us together, not with chains, not with fear, but with a love so absolute that even then, in those first moments, I knew it would cost us everything. Later, when the others had scattered to prepare food or mend nets, I found myself lingering close to him. Yeshua was seated upon a stone, the lake behind him catching the last fire of the sun. Mary of Magdala stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Not possessive, not hesitant, but steady, as though it belonged there. I hesitated. My heart thundered, but I stepped forward, for I could not keep silence. "Rabbi," I said, my voice rough, "why me? Why call me from Kerioth when so many stronger men could follow you?" He looked up at me, and the calm in his eyes was like water poured on my restless heart. "Because you came," he said simply, "because you have longed, and your longing is a door through which God may enter." Mary's gaze moved over me, searching. "Longing is a dangerous gift," she said quietly. Her voice carried a strength that both comforted and unsettled me. "It can lead a man to holiness or to ruin. Which will it be for you, Judas?" I swallowed hard, unable to answer. Yeshua reached for my hand. His touch was firm, warm, unshaken. "It will be as it must," he murmured, "but do not fear. Even the heaviest burden, when carried in love, becomes a crown." I felt my breath catch. In that instant, though I could not yet name it, a shadow passed through me, like the brief chill of a cloud crossing the sun. And Mary saw it. I know she did. Her eyes narrowed, not in judgment, but in sorrow, as though she glimpsed a thread of my destiny stretching far ahead. But Yeshua smiled, and the weight lifted. He rose, placed his arm lightly around Mary's shoulders, and beckoned me to walk with them. "Come," he said. "There's much to see, and the road is short." And so it began, not with a miracle, not with thunder from heaven, but with a word, a touch, and the quiet presence of the woman who shared his life. That was my first step into love and into tragedy. I had seen men with wives before, of course, and I had seen women tied to men by custom, by bargain, or by need. But never had I seen two people bound as Yeshua and Mary were. It was not the tie of ownership, no man's claim over a woman, no woman's dependence upon a man. It was something else, something rare, a union of equals, two flames burning side by side, each giving light to the other without dimming. When he spoke, Mary listened, not with submission, but with an attentiveness that sharpened his words, as though she drew the truth out of him with her gaze. And when she spoke, he turned to her fully, unashamed to let her voice rise among the men. That alone startled me. In our towns, women were often kept to the margins, their wisdom left unheard. Yet here was the rabbi, treating her words as if they were water from the same well that quenched his soul. At meals, she sat near him, and their silences were as telling as their speech. Sometimes his hand would brush hers, simple and unguarded, and in that gesture was more tenderness than any sermon. I thought then, perhaps this is why his teaching carries such weight, because he has known love not as an idea, but as flesh and spirit joined. Among the others, there were mixed feelings. Peter's eyes often flickered with unease when Mary spoke, as though unsure how to reconcile her boldness with the world he knew. John, young and pure of heart, seemed to adore her without question, finding in her strength the same wonder he found in Yeshua. Matthew kept silent, always watching. As for me, I was moved, though I did not know how to name what I felt. She was not my teacher, yet her presence shaped me. There was in her a certainty that both drew me close and held me at a distance. She carried him in ways none of us could, and I began to see that whatever task lay before me, it would be bound not only to him, but to her as well. In those first days, watching them, I realized something. Yeshua's kingdom was not a dream of power and conquest, as my brothers once whispered around the fire. It was a kingdom born of love, carried in human hearts, tested in the bonds between husband and wife, friend and friend, and I swore silently that I would serve that kingdom no matter the cost. Though we walked as a band of disciples, and though Yeshua gave his words to all who gathered, there were hours, quiet, unguarded hours, when I felt he turned to me alone. At first I thought it was chance, that he walked beside me on the road simply because space opened at my side, or that his hand brushed mine when he offered bread at supper. But as days passed, I knew it was more. He sought me out, not as a teacher above a student, but as a friend. One evening as we camped near Bethsaida, he drew me aside. The firelight flickered on his face, and the others' laughter faded into the night behind us. He asked of my childhood, of my father and mother, of the land in Kerioth, where I had labored with stone. None of the teachers of the law had ever cared to hear such things, yet he listened as though each word was a psalm, as though my life itself was a scripture, worthy of being read aloud. I confessed to him then my restlessness, my anger at Rome, my hunger for deliverance. He did not chide me, nor did he encourage me to violence, as zealots in the hills might have. Instead, he placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "Your hunger is holy, Judas, but hunger must be fed with bread, not with fire. What you long for is not the fall of Rome, but the rise of God's love." I trembled at his words. None had ever spoken to me so plainly, so tenderly, yet with such authority. There were other moments too, smaller yet etched into me. When we shared the road and I grew weary, he slowed his pace to match mine. When I faltered in understanding his parables, he explained them with patience, never once making me feel less. Sometimes when we prayed together, he would pause and look at me with that piercing gaze as if searching out the secret corners of my soul. In those moments, I felt that he knew me entirely, my doubts, my pride, my fear, my love, and still he chose me. That is what bound me to him more tightly than iron chains. Not his miracles, not his visions of the kingdom, but the simple, unbearable fact that he loved me. Not as a master loves a servant, nor as a commander loves his soldier, but as a brother loves a brother, as a man loves his truest friend. I would have gone anywhere for him then. I would have given anything. I did not yet know how much would be asked of me. Life with the disciples was nothing like the life I had known in Kerioth, nor even on the roads with merchants. It was at once harder and lighter. Harder because our days were spent walking under the pitiless sun, sleeping where we could, depending on the kindness of strangers. Lighter because the weight of my heart seemed lifted in his presence, even when my body was weary. We rose with the dawn. Sometimes Yeshua woke us in silence, already at prayer, his face turned to the light before the sun had crested the hills. Other times, it was the cawing of crows or the bray of donkeys in nearby villages that dragged us awake. Bread was broken, often dry and hard, dipped in oil if we were fortunate. Then we set out again, sandals biting at our feet, dust clinging to our skin. On the road, there was laughter. John and Andrew sang songs they half remembered from boyhood. Peter boomed out tales of storms at sea. Even Thomas, ever doubtful, would sometimes startle us with a sharp jest. Yet beneath the laughter lay a tension. We were men of different trades, different tempers. There were quarrels. Who was closest to the rabbi? Who best understood his words? Who deserved his favor? Peter, quick to anger, often bristled at my presence. I too was proud, and our clashes were not few. At the heart of it, though, was love. When one faltered on the road, another lifted him. When one hungered, the rest shared what little they had. Yeshua bound us together not with rule or command, but with his gaze, his voice, his touch. Even in our quarrels, we were brothers. Evenings were my favorite. After the crowds dispersed, after the blind had gone home with sight, the lame with strength, the broken-hearted with hope, we sat around the fire, and Yeshua spoke. Sometimes he told us stories, simple tales of sowers and shepherds, of lamps and coins. Other times he fell into silence, and the silence itself became a teaching, heavy with meaning. We leaned in, straining to catch every word, though often we understood little until days later, when his parables bloomed in our hearts like seeds. Mary was often near him. She prepared food with the other women who joined us from time to time, yet she was no servant. When Yeshua spoke, she listened with the same fierce attention as John, and often her questions cut deeper than ours. Some among us were uneasy at her place among us, but I could not deny her wisdom. In her presence, Yeshua seemed more himself, softer yet stronger. For myself, I began to find a place in the circle. My hands were skilled with coin from my years of trade, and so Yeshua trusted me with the common purse. It was no great honor in the eyes of the others, more a duty than a glory. But to me, it was a mark of his trust. Each time I counted the coins, each time I stretched them to feed us on the road, I felt the weight of his confidence resting in my hands. That daily life, dust, hunger, quarrels, laughter, prayer was ordinary, and yet it was not. For beneath it all I felt the trembling of something vast approaching, as if each step carried us near to a destiny we could not yet name. It was late, long after the others had surrendered to sleep. The fire had burned down to embers, and the night air carried the cool scent of the lake. I had stayed awake, restless, turning the coins of the purse over in my hand, though there was little light to see them by. Yeshua stirred from where he sat apart, gazing into the darkness. His face was calm, but there was a heaviness in his shoulders, as if the silence itself pressed down upon him. I rose quietly and moved to sit beside him. "You do not sleep," he said, his voice soft, not rebuke, but recognition. "I try," I admitted, "but the road is heavy on my mind, the crowds, the soldiers, even the brothers' quarrels. It seems all of it falls to pieces the moment your voice is silent." He looked at me then, and in his eyes the firelight glowed like two small suns. "It is not my voice they must learn to hear," he said. "It is the voice of the kingdom, already planted in them, in you." I shook my head. "Rabbi, I am not like John, with his open heart, nor Peter with his strength, nor Mary with her certainty. I am restless. I hunger for things I cannot name. Even when I count the coins, I feel both pride and shame. Why choose me?" He reached out, placed his hand on mine, still clutching the purse. "Because you carry both light and shadow," he said, "and the kingdom needs both." His words struck me with a chill, though his touch was warm. I wanted to ask him what he meant, but my tongue faltered. He only smiled faintly, as though he had spoken too much already. The night grew still again, broken only by the lapping of water on the shore. At last he spoke once more, barely more than a whisper. "There will come a night when you alone understand what must be done, and it will break your heart to do it. But Judas, it will not be betrayal. It will be love." I stared at him, breath caught, my hand trembling under his. I wanted to ask, what night, what burden? But his gaze was far away, as though he saw a road only he could walk. We sat there until the fire died, and though I did not yet understand, his words carved themselves into me as unshakable as stone. It was in Jerusalem during the feast when the truth of our path grew sharp. The city was swollen with pilgrims, men leading lambs for sacrifice, women carrying baskets of unleavened bread, children wide-eyed at the sight of the temple gleaming above them. Soldiers lined the streets, iron in their hands, suspicion in their eyes. Word had spread that Yeshua was coming. By the time we neared the city gates, the crowd was thick, pressing in with shouts of "Hosanna!" They laid cloaks on the ground, cut branches from trees, making a road of honor before him. To see it was to feel a kingdom already breaking through. But I saw also the faces of the priests watching from the steps, their lips tight, their whispers sharp. In the days that followed, the temple courts shook with his voice. He overturned the tables of the money changers, coins scattering across the stones, doves flapping in terror. "You have made my father's house a den of thieves," he cried, and his words struck like a hammer on the walls of corruption. The people cheered, their eyes alight, but I saw the hatred kindle in the eyes of the priests. To challenge Rome was dangerous. To challenge the temple was unforgivable. And then there was Lazarus. Yeshua had called him forth from the tomb not long before, and the news had spread like wildfire. A man once dead now walked among us, his very breath a defiance of the grave. I ate with him, heard his laughter. Yet even in his joy, I felt the unease growing. For such a sign could not be ignored. The authorities whispered that if this continued, all men would believe in him, and Rome would come down upon us with unrelenting fury. Among the disciples, voices grew restless. Peter longed for the moment when Yeshua would declare himself king. Simon the Zealot whispered of armies rising. Even gentle John dreamed of thrones beside him in glory. Only Mary seemed to understand the weight on his shoulders. I saw her weep when others still laughed. And me, I stood between awe and dread. I loved him with all that was in me, but I also knew what the others would not admit, that such a fire, burning so brightly, could not last in this world. Each miracle, each word against the priests, each step into the city tightened the noose around him. At night, when the city slept, he would draw me aside. "Judas," he said, "do you see it? The hour is near." And I did see it. I saw the storm gathering, the blades of Rome ready, the fury of the temple priests rising. And I knew, though I wished I did not, that I would be the one he would call upon when the hour came. We had been welcomed into the house of Lazarus, who was still a wonder to behold, breathing and laughing where once he had lain in the tomb. His sisters, Martha and Mary, received us with warmth, and the room filled with the smell of roasted lamb, of bread still warm from the oven, of wine poured freely in celebration. We reclined at table, weary from the road, yet gladdened by their hospitality. Laughter rose, though I confess mine was strained. The closer we drew to Jerusalem, the heavier the air pressed on me. Even in the midst of feasting, I could feel the storm waiting beyond the city walls. Then she entered, the other Mary of Magdala, carrying an alabaster jar. She moved with a calm certainty, her eyes fixed only on him. Without a word, she knelt, broke the jar, and poured the ointment upon Yeshua's head, upon his feet, the fragrance filling every corner of the room. Spikenard, costly beyond reckoning. The scent clung to the air, to our clothes, even to our skin. Some of us stirred uneasily. The oil was worth a fortune, more than many families would see in a year. My hand went instinctively to the purse at my side, feeling the scant coins within. My tongue burned with protest, and I spoke. "Why was this not sold and the money given to the poor?" The room went still. My words were not false. My heart did burn for the poor, for the broken, for the hungry we met each day. Yet if I am truthful, I must admit there was more within me. A fear of waste, yes, but also a restless envy. For in that moment she gave him something I never could. A love so unmeasured it cared nothing for cost. Yeshua turned to me, his eyes gentle, his voice steady. "Leave her be, Judas. She has done a beautiful thing. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me." The words struck me silent. Around us the others murmured, some in agreement, some confused. But Mary said nothing. Her hands lingered on his feet, her tears mingling with the oil. She knew. She knew what we refused to see, that this act was no indulgence, but preparation. Her love was not reckless, it was prophetic. The fragrance of the oil clung to him long after that night. Even as we walked toward Jerusalem, I could still smell it on the air, a perfume mingled with the unspoken truth of what was coming. And though I did not yet understand my part in it, her act became a shadow over me, reminding me that the cost of love is always everything. We gathered in the upper room as the sun sank over Jerusalem. The city outside buzzed with pilgrims preparing for Passover. But within those walls there was only the flicker of lamps, the smell of roasted lamb, and the closeness of men and women who had walked too far together to be called anything but family. We reclined at the table, Peter loud and restless, John leaning near the rabbi with the tenderness of a son, Thomas with furrowed brow, always questioning. Mary of Magdala sat near Yeshua, her eyes never leaving him. I too watched him closely, for his face carried a weight it had never borne before. When the bread was brought, Yeshua took it in his hands, lifted his eyes to heaven, and broke it. The sound was sharp, like stone splitting. He gave it to us, saying, "This is my body, given for you. Take and remember." Then he took the cup, the deep red of the wine glowing in the lamplight. "This is my blood, poured out for many. Drink and live." The others did not understand. Some wept, some grew troubled. But I saw the steadiness in his eyes. He was not speaking of death as an end, but as a doorway. He meant to show us that death was not real, that the body could be broken, but the life of God could not be bound. When the meal was nearly done, his gaze found mine. The room blurred. All sound seemed to fall away. He leaned closer, speaking so softly I alone heard, "Judas, the hour has come. You must go to them. You must show them where I am." My heart stopped. "Rabbi, no!" The word tore from me like a cry. "Do not ask this of me. Send another. Let me stay." His hand found mine under the table. His grip was firm, his eyes unwavering. "No one else can bear it. They would falter. But you, my friend, you will not fail me." I trembled. "They will call it betrayal." "Yes," he said, "with sorrow, yet with peace. But you and I will know it is love. Through this, the truth will be revealed, that death has no hold, that love can't be killed. You will hand me over, and I will show them freedom." Tears burned my eyes. I wanted to shout, to refuse, to cling to him and never let go. Yet his gaze held me fast, and in it I saw the trust of a brother, the bond of one who had chosen me from the beginning. Mary's eyes flickered to mine then, and I knew she understood. Her face was stricken, yet she did not speak. Only her silence bore witness. Yeshua pressed the morsel of bread into my hand. "What you must do, do quickly." And so I rose, my legs weak beneath me, my heart shattering with each step toward the door. The laughter and lamplight faded behind me, swallowed by the night. I walked out not as a traitor, but as the chosen bearer of a terrible love, the one asked to deliver him into the hands of those who hated him, so that all might see the truth he longed to show, that death itself is an illusion, and love the only reality. The night swallowed me as I stepped from the upper room. The door shut behind me, and with it the warmth of the lamps, the smell of bread and wine, the sound of voices I had come to love more than my own life. For a moment I stood in the narrow street, breath caught in my chest, the cool air burning like fire in my lungs. I carried no sword, no shield, only the weight of his trust, and it was heavier than iron. Each step I took echoed with his words, "You will not fail me." They were meant as comfort, yet they cut me deeper than any blade. The city was restless. Roman patrols marched their rounds, the gleam of their armor catching what little moonlight broke through the clouds. The alleys smelled of smoke and sweat, of lambs being slaughtered for the feast. I passed men in cloaks whispering in corners, and I wondered if they guessed who I was or what errand I carried. My very breath felt like treason. I thought of the others, John's tender smile, Peter's fierce loyalty, Thomas's endless questions, and how they would see me when the hour came. I thought of Mary's eyes on me at the table, heavy with knowledge she could not speak. Above all, I thought of Yeshua's hand on mine, pressing the bread into my palm, his eyes unbroken even as he asked of me the unthinkable. My soul twisted between love and dread. Part of me longed to turn back, to fall at his feet, to beg him to release me from this task. Yet I knew, with a certainty beyond reason, that he would not. He had chosen me for this, not Peter with his sword, not John with his love, not Mary with her tears, me. And so I walked on, each step heavier than the last. I was not delivering him to death, though that is what men would say. I was delivering him to his purpose, so that he might reveal the truth no cross could silence, that death is no master, and love no slave. Still, my heart broke with every step, for though I carried his trust like a crown, I also carried his absence like a wound. and wounds bleed, even when hidden. That night, under the watchful stars of Jerusalem, I became the most faithful of his friends, and the most cursed in the eyes of men. I did not go to them with pride, nor with malice. My feet dragged as though chains bound them, though no soldier held me. Every corner I turned, I prayed for some interruption. An old friend to call my name, a patrol to block my way, even a stone in the road to make me stumble and fall. Anything to delay the moment, but the streets opened before me like a wound that would not close. The temple loomed above, its great stones glowing pale under the moon. I had once climbed those steps with joy, bringing offerings, my heart alive with the prayers of my people. That night I climbed as a condemned man, my lips moving in whispers I dared not let others hear. Forgive me, Lord. Forgive me, Rabbi. Let this cup pass from me. At the gate, 2 guards eyed me warily. I expected them to turn me away, to call me mad. But when I spoke the words, "I must see the priests. It is about the man from Galilee," their suspicion melted into interest. They led me through darkened halls to where the rulers of our people sat waiting. The chief priest's gaze fell upon me, sharp and hungry, like a hawk sighting prey. "Judas of Kerioth," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "We have heard of you. One of the 12, are you not? What brings you here?" I wanted to scream. Love brings me here. Trust brings me here. Not betrayal, never betrayal. But my throat burned with silence. I forced the words out, flat and lifeless. "I will show you where he is when the time is right." They leaned forward, eyes gleaming as though victory had already been placed in their hands. "And for this service," one said, "we will give you silver." Silver, the weight of coin, 30 pieces, was pressed into my palm. Cold, lifeless metal. I thought of the purse I carried for the disciples, the humble coins stretched to feed the hungry, to clothe the poor. These coins felt nothing like that. They were not currency, but chains, binding me to the task. As I left the chamber, the money clinking in its pouch, I felt the full horror of it, that history would remember the silver, not the love. That men would call it greed, not obedience. That my name would be cursed, though my heart was breaking in devotion. I pressed my hand to the pouch as though to crush it into dust. "Not for this," I whispered into the night. "Not for coin, for him. Only for him." Yet still the weight dragged at me, for no matter what my heart knew, the world would never understand. The hours between their chamber and the garden were a torment, greater than any scourge. I walked the streets of Jerusalem like a man already condemned, the silver heavy at my side, each coin striking like a hammer upon my heart. I returned to the others, to the room where laughter still lingered faintly in the air, and I could not meet their eyes. Peter spoke boldly of swords, of thrones, of the kingdom breaking forth any moment. John leaned against Yeshua as a child at peace. Mary sat in silence, her gaze as deep as the night sky. And I smiled, I ate, I drank, though inside I bled. Every word from Yeshua's lips pierced me. When he prayed aloud for us to be one, I thought, how can I be one with them when I am the hand that will deliver you? When he warned that a shepherd must be struck and the sheep scattered, I felt the words strike me like stones. Did the others notice? Did they hear what I heard? Or was it only me, singled out by his knowing eyes? I slipped away often that night, pacing in the shadows. I looked up at the stars, the same stars I had prayed beneath in Kerioth as a boy. Then I had begged God to make me worthy of the deliverer. Now I begged to be released from the task he himself had given me. I clutched the pouch of silver and thought of flinging it into the street, of running to him, confessing everything, begging him to choose another. Yet each time I heard again his voice at the table, "You will not fail me." And I knew I could not turn aside. To refuse him now would be the true betrayal. Still, the torment ate at me. When I closed my eyes, I saw him crucified, though I did not yet know the shape of that death. I saw Mary weeping, the disciples scattering, my own name spat upon for generations. Was this the path of love? Could such ruin carry redemption? And yet, in fleeting moments, I felt a strange peace, as though some part of me already knew the truth, that his death would not be the end, but the revelation, that by walking into the hands of those who hated him, he would prove death powerless and love unbreakable. I tried to cling to that hope, but still the hours dragged like iron chains. Each tick of time carried me closer to the garden, closer to the kiss, closer to the moment when I would forever be known not as Judas the friend, but Judas the betrayer. And so I waited, my heart breaking with every breath, until the darkness itself beckoned me to rise and walk into history's curse. When the hour came, I led them, a detachment of Roman soldiers, their armor clattering like chains, and behind them the temple guards, faces set with grim resolve. Torches flared in the night air, their smoke curling upward, choking the stars. Each step toward Gethsemane was a tearing of my soul. My heart begged me to run, to vanish into the shadows, to let another hand deliver him. But my feet would not turn aside. His words bound me as surely as the soldier's armor bound their flesh. You will not fail me. The soldiers spoke little. They were men of iron, accustomed to blood. The priest's servants whispered, casting me glances. Some triumphant, some suspicious, as though even they could not believe one of his own would lead them. They did not know. They thought I had sold him for silver, as though love could be measured in coin. I clenched the pouch at my side, hating it, knowing that history would remember the clink of money, not the cry of my heart. The olive trees loomed ahead, their branches twisted like old men in prayer. The ground sloped upward, and I knew the place well. We had often prayed there, away from the city's noise. It felt like holy ground, too sacred for what I carried in my breast. As we neared, the dread thickened. I thought of his face at supper, calm yet sorrowful, already resigned. I thought of Mary's eyes burning into mine, knowing without words what I must do. I thought of my brothers, Peter with his fiery zeal, John with his open heart, and how they would never forgive me. Yet still I walked, each step heavier than the last. The torchlight swayed, shadows leapt upon the trees, and the night seemed to hold its breath. I whispered beneath my breath as we approached, so low no ear but heaven could hear. Forgive me, Rabbi. Forgive me, friend. Let this act be love, though the world will call it betrayal. And then the garden opened before us, and I saw him waiting, still composed as though he had known every step of my walk. There he was. While the soldiers shifted their shields and the temple guards muttered in low tones, Yeshua stood among the olive trees, as though he had been expecting us all along. The torchlight caught his face, and I saw no terror there, no scrambling for escape. Only stillness, only calm. His robe stirred faintly in the night wind, his hands folded before him. He looked not like a man cornered, but like a king in his own court, waiting for the hour to strike the bell. The branches above him creaked in the breeze, like old witnesses groaning under the weight of what they knew. Behind him some of the others stirred, Peter's hand already reaching for a blade, John trembling with confusion, the rest weary from their prayers. They did not yet see the fullness of it, though he had told them often enough. But I saw, I knew. When his eyes found mine, the world seemed to fall away. The torches, the armor, the muttering priests, all faded. There was only that gaze, steady and piercing, holding me in place. Not anger, not accusation, not even sorrow. Only love, vast and terrible, like a fire I could neither bear nor turn from. In that instant, I wanted to fall to my knees, to cry out before them all. This is no betrayal. This is his will. This is love. But my voice failed. My heart thundered with the weight of the secret only he and I shared. He gave the smallest of nods, almost unseen, as though to say, "Now, Judas, do what you must. I am ready." I felt my breath leave me in a shudder. The garden was hushed, the soldiers poised, the night itself waiting. And I, torn between devotion and despair, stepped forward toward him, my lips burning with the kiss that would seal my fate. My feet dragged across the earth, each step heavier than the last, as though the very soil sought to hold me back. The torches hissed in the night air, their smoke clinging to my throat, making it hard to breathe. My chest burned, not from the walk, but from the weight of what my love was about to do. He stood so near. The olive branches swayed above him, whispering like mourners, and still his eyes were calm. He had given me this task. I knew it. He had chosen me, trusted me. And yet my soul rebelled. Every part of me screamed to stop, to fall at his feet, to confess all before soldiers and disciples alike, to cry out, "He is innocent. He is holy. You cannot take him." But then I remembered his words at the supper. "What you must do, do quickly." I felt the press of the silver at my side, coins colder than ice. I hated them, hated the sound of them clinking like chains. The world would believe I had sold him. History would write me as traitor. Even my brothers, those I had walked with, would curse my name. And still, I stepped closer. My heart broke with every movement. It was like walking into fire to save the one you love, knowing you will be consumed but unable to turn away. At last I stood before him. The soldiers loomed behind, waiting. Peter's hand twitched at his sword. John's face was pale, searching mine in disbelief. And Yeshua, he did not flinch, did not withdraw. His gaze met mine, steady, merciful, unshaken. My lips trembled, my hands shook. In that instant, I thought I might collapse under the weight of it. For the kiss I was about to give was not the kiss of betrayal. It was the kiss of obedience, of love beyond measure, of a heart breaking open for the sake of his will. And so, with tears stinging my eyes, I leaned forward, my soul screaming in silence, and let my lips brush his cheek. My lips touched his cheek, soft, warm, human. And in that heartbeat, the world seemed to fall away. No torches, no soldiers, no clatter of armor or shouts of men. Only us. I had kissed him before, as brothers do in greeting, in farewell, in simple affection, but never like this, never with my whole soul straining against itself, torn between devotion and despair. The kiss was a wound, and it was love. I expected sorrow in his eyes, perhaps even reproach. But when I drew back and met his gaze, I found neither. There was only mercy, vast and unshaken, a mercy that seemed to cradle even my breaking heart. His eyes said, "I know. I chose you. Do not be afraid." In that silent exchange, I felt him forgive me before I had even finished the act. No, more than forgive. He honored me. He accepted the kiss as if it were not betrayal at all, but consecration, as though my lips had sealed not his fate, but the mystery of his purpose. Tears burned in my eyes. I wanted to cling to him, to shout before the soldiers, "Do you not see? This is no traitor's act, but the fulfillment of his will." But the moment was gone as quickly as it came. The clamor of the soldiers rushed back into the night. Hands seized him, rough and eager. Peter's sword flashed in torchlight. The disciples scattered, voices crying out in fear. And yet Yeshua's gaze lingered on me, steady even as they bound him. That was the last gift he gave me in freedom. His eyes upon mine, not condemning, not accusing, but loving still. Love that broke me, love that the world would never believe. The moment shattered like a clay jar dashed against stone. The soldiers surged forward, their torches flaring, shadows leaping wild upon the olive trees. Iron clashed, voices rose. Rough hands seized him, binding his arms with cords, as though he were a common thief. The glow of firelight danced across his face, but still he did not resist. He stood with the calm of a man who had already chosen this path long before, tonight. Then Peter's voice split the night, furious, desperate. His sword flashed, striking down upon the servant of the high priest. I saw the man stagger back, blood streaming from his ear. Chaos erupted. Shouts, curses, soldiers raising their shields. For a heartbeat, I thought it would become a slaughter, our little band cut down like lambs in the dark. But Yeshua stepped forward. Enough. His voice carried with such authority that even the Romans paused. He touched the wounded man, and I saw the blood vanish, the ear whole again. Mercy in the midst of violence. Such was his way to the very end. The guards, emboldened, closed in. They gripped his arms, pulled him toward the path leading back to the city. The disciples scattered like startled birds. Some fled into the trees, others into the night streets. Only a few lingered at the edges, their faces pale with shock. I stood frozen, my heart thundered, my throat tight with unshed cries. This was the moment he had spoken of, the moment he had entrusted to me. And yet, seeing him bound, seeing the hands that healed so many twisted in rope, it tore through me like a spear. He turned his head once, just once, and our eyes met through the chaos. No words passed, but his gaze held me. Not anger, not even sadness. Only that same impossible love. It was as though he whispered without speaking, "Do not despair, Judas. This must be." And then he was gone, swallowed by the night, dragged down the slope toward the city and its awaiting trial. I remained in the garden, trembling, the silver heavy at my side, the echoes of his voice and his gaze ringing in me like a bell that would never stop. The soldiers believed they had taken him. The priests would believe they had won. But I knew the truth. He had given himself, and I had been the hand that opened the door. The garden emptied into silence after they dragged him away. Only the broken branches and the smell of oil lamps remained, as if the earth itself mourned what had passed. I lingered in the shadows, shaking until at last my legs carried me down the path toward the city. Jerusalem was alive with whispers. Torches flared in the courtyards of the high priest, and I heard the voices of men gathering in haste. Words spread like fire on dry grass. The Galilean has been seized. Some muttered with triumph, others with fear. I walked among them unseen, yet my chest burned as though every gaze condemned me. I forced myself to the court of Caiaphas. There I saw them drag Yeshua inside. The priests, robed in splendor, sat like judges, their faces sharp with envy and hatred. They called forth false witnesses, men eager for coin or favor, each telling a different tale, that he had spoken against the temple, that he claimed kingship against Caesar, that he threatened destruction. Their words twisted his teaching like vines strangling a tree. And through it all, he stood silent. No protest, no defense, only calm. It was as though he bore not only their accusations, but also my anguish, Peter's confusion, John's grief, Mary's tears, all of it upon his shoulders. When at last the high priest cried, "Tell us plainly, are you the Son of the Blessed?" Yeshua raised his eyes and answered, his voice clear, "I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, and coming with the clouds of heaven." The court erupted. Robes were torn. Voices shouted, "Blasphemy!" They spat upon him, struck him, mocked him. My stomach twisted. I wanted to rush forward, to shield him, to cry out, "You don't understand. He goes willingly, he goes in love." But my feet would not move. I was paralyzed, bound by the very task he had given me. I fled into the night, stumbling through alleys, the silver pounding against my side like a curse. I pressed my hands to my ears, but still I heard the shouts, "Guilty! Guilty!" I collapsed in a doorway, my body shaking. I remembered his words, "This is not betrayal, Judas, it is love." I clung to them like a drowning man to driftwood. Yet still the question gnawed at me. If love, why did it feel like ruin? Why did the air itself taste of ash? The trial was only beginning, but already I felt condemned alongside him. For though he bore his fate with calm, I bore mine with torment, and the world would never see the difference. Dawn crept over Jerusalem, pale and cold, yet the city was already awake with fury. They led him from the house of Caiaphas to the fortress of Antonia, where Pilate sat in judgment. I followed at a distance, hidden among the crowd, the silver still at my side like burning coals. Pilate looked upon him with weary disdain. To Rome he was but another troublemaker, another prophet stirring the people. They asked Pilate for death, shouting that he claimed kingship, that he opposed Caesar. I saw Pilate's eyes narrow, weighing politics more than justice. "Are you the king of the Jews?" Pilate asked. Yeshua stood silent and then answered with a calm that seemed to shake the very stones. "You say so?" I could see the prefect's unease. He found no crime worthy of death. He sent Yeshua to Herod, and when Herod mocked him and returned him, Pilate tried again to free him. "I find no fault in this man," he said, his voice hard, but the priests shouted louder. The crowd, stirred like a swarm by their venom, roared, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate offered them Barabbas, a murderer, a zealot, a man who had spilt blood in rebellion. "Shall I release for you the king of the Jews, or Barabbas?" he asked. The answer came back like thunder. "Barabbas." I thought my heart would break from the sound. To free the violent and condemn the innocent, was this not the world turned upside down? Pilate, seeing the uproar swell, washed his hands before them. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he declared. But water cannot cleanse cowardice nor wash away the truth. He handed Yeshua over to be scourged, to be crucified. I saw them strike him, drape him in purple, press a crown of thorns upon his head. Blood ran down his brow, yet his face shone with a peace that made mockery of their cruelty. He looked as though he carried not shame, but glory, and I could no longer bear it. My body shook with sobs I dared not release in public. I wanted to scream, to tear my clothes, to run into the court and confess, "It was me. He asked me, do not condemn him, condemn me instead." But I knew it would change nothing. The hour had come, as he said it must. Still, as Pilate pronounced the sentence, I felt the earth tilt beneath me. My love had led him here, and now the cross awaited. I could not hold the weight any longer. The 30 coins had become fire at my side, burning through cloth, through flesh, through soul. Every clink was a hammer blow, every step an echo of betrayal the world would never understand. So I went back to the priests. The very men who had feigned piety in their robes, who had twisted his words into chains, who had spat upon him as though spittle could stain the holy. I burst into their chamber, my hands shaking, my voice raw. "I have sinned," I cried. The words tore from me like blood from a wound. "I have betrayed innocent blood." They looked up at me, their faces smooth as stone, eyes cold and unmoved. One of them sneered, "What is that to us? See to it yourself." I flung the pouch onto the floor. The coins scattered across the temple stones, clattering in every corner, shining like curses in the lamplight. "Take it back," I shouted, my voice breaking. "I do not want your blood money. It was never for this." The sound rang through the chamber, but their faces did not change. To them, I was finished, my use ended, my soul not their concern. They turned away, muttering of laws and rituals, ignoring the man undone before them. The silver lay where it had fallen, no longer mine, no longer theirs, cursed by what it had bought. My chest heaved, my tears fell hot. I had given everything in love, and the world would remember only the coins. I stumbled out into the courtyard, my body shaking, my heart a ruin. Outside, the people still shouted for crucifixion. The sky had grown heavy with clouds, as though even heaven could not bear what was to come. And I was alone. Cast aside by those I had served, condemned by history, yet still bound by love to the man I had delivered. I followed at a distance, hidden among the crowds, my cloak drawn tight against my face. I dared not come too near. Peter would have struck me down if his eyes had found me. John would have wept with fury, and Mary would have pierced me through with her silence. Yet I could not turn away. Love chained me to every step of his walk. they laid the cross upon his shoulders. Heavy wood, rough and splintering. He staggered beneath its weight, though never once did he curse or resist. The soldiers struck him, shouted at him, forced him forward like a beast to slaughter. The people jeered, some with hatred, some with fear, some with the mindless cruelty of the mob. And I, hiding in the throng, felt each blow strike my own flesh. 3 times he fell. Each time I nearly rushed forward to lift the beam from him, to cast myself between him and the whip. But his words bound me still. This must be. And so I remained in shadow, nails of silence piercing me deeper than any iron Rome could forge. At one point his eyes lifted through the press of the crowd. For a heartbeat, they found mine. Even under the crown of thorns, even with blood darkening his face, there was no reproach in them. Only love, steady and unbroken. And in that gaze, I felt both saved and destroyed. Saved, because he still called me friend. Destroyed, because I knew the world would never believe it. When they reached the hill, I could not follow closer. I heard the hammers, I heard the cries. And I knew, though death was no master of him, though he would prove it an illusion, still my heart would bear forever the memory of that wood, those nails, that crown. The sky grew dark and the earth trembled. Some fled in terror, others beat their breasts in grief. I could only stand in the shadows, weeping silently, a man undone by love. He had told me, "You will not fail me." And yet watching him lifted high upon the cross, I felt nothing but failure. I had given him to them. I had opened the door. I had loved him to ruin. And still, in his final breath, when he cried that all was finished, I knew the truth. It was not ruin at all, but revelation. Death was undone. Love was eternal. But for me, for Judas, it was already too late. I tried to keep to the edges of the crowd, but still their eyes found me. Peter's glance was fire, rage barely contained, grief sharpened into blame. His hand twitched to the hilt of his dagger, and had not John seized his arm, I think he might have struck me down then and there. To him I was no brother, no fellow at labor on the road, weary and hungry beside him, but the serpent who had delivered our master into chains. Thomas's gaze was darker still, not fury but disbelief, the kind that curdles into despair. His eyes seemed to say, "How could you? You who shared the bread with us, who carried the purse, who walked beside him. How could you do this thing?" I could not meet his stare. And John, gentle John, his face was wet with tears. He did not spit, did not curse. He only looked at me with sorrow, so deep it felt like a knife. That sorrow was worse than Peter's rage, worse than Thomas's disbelief. For in John's eyes, I saw what history would make of me. The brother who turned, the betrayer forever set apart. But it was Mary's gaze that undid me. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her eyes held both judgment and mercy, flame and water. It was as though she saw through me entirely, to the moment in the upper room, to the nod Yeshua had given, to the unbearable trust he had placed in me. She knew. Of all of them, she knew. And yet, even with that knowing, there was no easing in her look. For though she understood, she also carried the grief of a wife, watching her beloved broken. My part in that grief was unerasable. Her silence pressed heavier than any curse. So I turned my face away. I dared not linger in their presence. I was a man split in two, chosen by Yeshua, despised by his friends, loved in secret, condemned in sight. No place left for me among them, no word I could speak that would change the story now unfolding. I walked away from their eyes into the shadows, the world already casting my name in stone. Judas the betrayer. When they had nailed him and lifted him high, when the sky had darkened and the earth trembled beneath us, when he had breathed his last and whispered that all was finished, I fled. Not to the others, not to Mary, not even to the silence of prayer. I fled into the wilderness outside the city, like Cain driven from the garden, carrying my curse in my breast. The hills were barren, the stones sharp beneath my feet. The sky hung low, bruised with storm, and the wind howled like a mourner. I stumbled along dry paths, clutching at my robe, my body shaking. I had no food, no water, only the memory of his eyes, his voice, his kiss upon my cheek. I wandered as though the earth itself had no place for me. In every village I passed, I imagined the whispers. There he is, Judas, the one who sold the master, the traitor. Faces turned in my mind, some with scorn, some with pity, none with love. Sleep would not come. When I closed my eyes, I saw him, first at Galilee, smiling as he lifted me to my feet, then in Bethany, his face glowing as Mary anointed him, then in the garden, calm beneath the torches. And always, always that look. Do not fear, Judas. This must be. I tried to cling to it, but the memory twisted. My heart cried out, if this must be, why do I feel ruined? Why do I stand alone, condemned by the very brothers who once called me friend? The silver haunted me. Though I had cast it away, I felt its weight still, every clink echoing in my chest. To the priests, it was blood price. To the world, it was greed. To me, it was nothing, less than dust. Yet no one would ever believe that. No one would know that my act was obedience, that my kiss was love. I walked until my strength broke. I sank to the ground beneath an olive tree, the same kind of tree that had borne witness to the kiss. I pressed my face to the earth and wept. My tears tasted of dust and salt. I begged heaven for a word, a sign, some whisper that I was still beloved. But the night gave no answer. Only silence. Only my own voice echoing back in the hollow of my heart. And so I wandered, broken until the thought grew clear as iron. If he had surrendered his life to show that death was no master, then perhaps my death too could be a testimony, not to betrayal, but to love that could not bear its own weight. I lay beneath the olive tree, the night pressing down upon me, my body drained, my soul torn. The earth was damp, the air heavy, and my thoughts circled like carrion birds. I had nothing left but grief. And then, whether it was a vision born of exhaustion or the mercy of heaven, I cannot say, I saw him. Not as he hung on the cross, broken and bloodied, not as the soldiers dragged him through the streets. I saw him as I had first seen him, by the lake in Galilee, sun on his face, the wind stirring his hair, his eyes alive with a fire that made all things new. He smiled at me, that same quiet smile he had given when he lifted me from my knees and said, I have searched for you. In the vision he stepped closer. His hand reached out, not bound, not pierced, but whole, and rested upon my shoulder. His touch burned with tenderness. Judas, he said, his voice steady, the same voice that had calmed storms and called the dead to life. Do not despair. What you have done is not betrayal, but obedience. You opened the way. You were faithful when no other could bear the weight. Through you, the truth will be seen. Death has no hold. Love cannot be destroyed. Tears poured down my face. I fell at his feet, clutching them, sobbing, Rabbi, forgive me. He lifted me as he had once before, and his gaze held no shadow. I do not forgive you, Judas, he said, for there is nothing to forgive. I chose you. I trusted you, and you have not failed me. The vision faded then, dissolving into the night, but the warmth of his hand lingered on my shoulder. I pressed my palm to that place, desperate to keep it. For the first time since the garden, my heart felt still. Not whole, not free of sorrow, but steady enough to walk the last steps laid before me. If he had embraced his death to show it was not real, then so would I. Not in despair, but in love. Not as traitor, but as servant. Not abandoned, but chosen. And with that vision burning in me, I rose to meet my end. I know what men will say of me. The word is already forming on their tongues. Betrayer. The one who sold his master for silver, the one whose kiss delivered the Son of Man into chains. My name will become a curse, spat in anger, whispered in warning. Children will shudder when they hear it. Priests will preach it as a lesson in treachery. But I pray, though I know it may not be in this age, that one day the truth will be seen. I do not ask to be called righteous. I do not ask to be praised, nor even forgiven. Only that the world might know I loved him, that every step I took toward the priests was agony. Every coin that touched my hand was a wound. Every moment of that night was a breaking of my heart. That my kiss was not treachery, but obedience to his trust, to his will, to his love. I hope they will remember me, not as the serpent in the garden, but as the friend who bore the unbearable. The one chosen to play the darkest part so that the light might be revealed. The one who carried the curse so that others could carry the blessing. If they must call me anything, let them call me faithful unto despair. Let them say, Judas was the one who walked into the shadows so that Yeshua could show that even death is lightless and hollow. And if no man ever speaks such words, perhaps heaven will. Perhaps when my soul rises into the silence where he waits, he will look upon me once more with those eyes that never condemned and whisper the truth. Well done, my friend, you did not fail me. That is enough, that is all I hope to be remembered for. Rabbi, my friend, my love, hear me now in this last hour, when the night is thick and my heart is weary. I have walked the path you set before me. My feet faltered, my soul trembled, but still I went, because you asked it of me. You trusted me with the burden no other could bear, and though the world will curse my name, I held to your word, and I did not fail you. Yet still my heart is broken. I cannot carry the weight of their hatred, nor the silence of my brother's eyes. They will never know the truth, but you know, and that is enough. So I laid down my life now, as you laid down yours, not in despair, but in love. If death is no master, then let my death also bear witness to the freedom you have shown. If love is eternal, then let it cover even the curse spoken against me. When I cross into the silence, let me see you again, as I did by Galilee, smiling, your hand reaching to lift me from the dust. Call me your friend once more, so that all the sorrow of this night may be swallowed in your light. Into your hands, Yeshua, I give my spirit, not as betrayer, as beloved, as yours. The olive grove was silent, save for the rustle of branches in the wind. I had wandered far enough from the city that no voices reached me, no torches glared, no eyes accused. Only the trees bore witness. Perhaps that was fitting, for they had witnessed the kiss as well. I found a rope, coarse, rough, a merchant's cord cast aside, and I held it in my hands as though it were a serpent. My fingers trembled, yet my heart was steady. I had given him into their hands as he willed, and now I would give myself into the mystery he had revealed, that death was no end. I climbed the tree slowly, each step heavy with memory. The laughter of my brothers on the road, Mary's silence, John's tears, Peter's fire, his eyes, always his eyes, burning into me with love unbroken. My whole life was in those steps, rising toward an end that was also a beginning. At the branch, I tied the rope. My hands shook, but not with fear. No, my fear had already burned away. What remained was grief and love and the strange peace of obedience fulfilled. I slipped the cord around my neck. The bark bit into my palms as I steadied myself. I lifted my eyes once more to the heavens, where the stars burned faint behind the clouds, and I whispered, Rabbi, I come. Friend, do not turn from me. Let this act, like yours, be proof that death cannot hold us. Receive me not as traitor, but as servant, as brother, as beloved. And then I stepped into the silence. The world vanished, the ground, the tree, the sorrow, the shame. For a heartbeat, there was only the press of the rope, the rush of air, the dark. But in that dark, before even breath had left me, I saw him. His arms open, his gaze as steady as ever, and his voice clear as the first call by the Galilee shore. "Come, Judas, you have not failed me." And so I gave myself into his hands. The rope, the branch, the earth, they fell away like shadows at dawn. I felt no pain, no fear, no clamor of the crowd. Only release, only stillness. And in that stillness, light. It was not the harsh blaze of the sun, nor the wavering glow of torches. It was a light that seemed to breathe, alive with love, and there within it he stood. Yeshua, whole, radiant, yet utterly the same as I had always known him. The carpenter's son, the rabbi by the lake, the friend who had lifted me to my feet. His arms were open. His eyes shone with that same unbreakable mercy. "Judas," he said, and my name was no curse here, no weight of shame. It was music. It was welcome. I fell before him, tears streaming, though they were no longer tears of despair. "Rabbi, I did what you asked, but the world will never know. They will call me betrayer until the end of days." He raised me up, just as he had the first time, his hand steady, his gaze unwavering. "Let them call you what they will. The truth is, written not in their words, but in love. And love remembers rightly. You were faithful, Judas, faithful unto the end." His embrace covered me then, and all the torment, all the loneliness, all the centuries of curses yet to come melted away like mist before the morning. I was home. So let the world call me traitor. Let my name be spat upon, my story twisted. It matters little, for in his eyes I am not betrayer, but beloved, not lost, but found, not condemned, but crowned with the terrible grace of obedience. And if ever one soul, wandering in sorrow, should hear my story and understand that love is stronger than death, then even my curse will have become blessing. For death was undone, love endured, and I, Judas his friend, am with him forever.